Welcome to Metal Matters, a Gimme Radio podcast. I'm your host, Mike Hill, and I'll be leading you on this adventure. We'll be getting into deep discussions about classic records, profiles on up-and-coming bands, and interviews with your favorite artists. You can check out new episodes every week, so be sure to subscribe and never miss out. Hey guys, welcome back. Before we get started, I'd like to personally thank everyone who has been listening. It means a lot to me. I have a lot of fun doing these things, but without you guys, there's no audience. If you dig the show, please feel free to share it. Tell your friends, leave a review on iTunes. The reviews and star ratings definitely make a big difference. For this week's episode, we have Al Dawson, the U.S. label manager for Earache Records, the label that helped define grindcore, death metal, and extreme music. Brought us Bolt Thrower, Napalm Death, Carcass, Anal Cunt, Godflesh, the list goes on. I've known Al for like 2 decades. He's a cool guy, and we had a great time talking about the old days as well as the new territory that the label seems to be heading into. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to John Brown's Smokehouse, where Al and I had lunch afterward. If you're in Long Island City at any point, hit that place up. It's some of the best barbecue in the tri-state area. I feel like a long time goes by between you and I actually running into each other.
Right. But, I mean, I used to come and see pretty much every show that Anodyne played back in the day, and obviously I've seen Tombs a bunch as well. But we actually met through my old publicist, Curran Reynolds, if you remember.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. He brought you to the office in maybe 2000. Were you living up in Boston then or something?
No, in 2000 I was down here.
Right.
That was, shortly after moving to New York from Boston.
Right, okay. I knew there was some Boston connection or whatever.
Yeah.
Nice. Good stuff, man. But anyway, let's get into this. What do you need to know? What's going on?
Well, first of all, Al, what I really would like to know is where the hell you've come from, man.
Okay.
You're not English, right?
No, not English at all. You don't know this story?
I do.
Okay.
Maybe the people out there don't know what your origins are.
So I am Australian. My hometown is a place called Perth, Perth, on the west coast of Australia. We actually have the reputation as being the most isolated capital city in the world. It's quicker to fly to Asia, 5 hours versus 6 hours to fly to Sydney or Melbourne. And in between, if you drive it, unlike America, the lower 48, where you can hit a town every couple of hours, there's nothing for at least 2 days drive, like Mad Max desert sort of stuff. So it's pretty isolated, but I guess after World War II, Australia had a big push to repopulate. So they had a thing with the British, since it's a British colony, where if your dad was like an engineer or a plumber, or some sort of tradesman, and they had £5, I don't even know what £5 in the 50s would be, $50 or something like that, they would ship you out to Australia and you could start a new life. So there's a big British, English community, Irish community out there. So we were exposed, we're pretty much well in touch with what was going on in England as far as music, even in the 70s when I was a kid and whatnot. But I knew that I wanted to do something in music, so I knew I had to get out of there because basically at that point, at least, there was probably only 2 jobs in the music industry, and people who had those jobs were going to keep them for life. They weren't ever going to let go. So I knew I had to leave. My favorite bands were all English or American, so I figured I could go to America, find a girl, and do that green card thing like the movie in the 80s, or go to England. My mother's Scottish. I had the right to live there, buy land, vote, whatever. So to me, that seemed like more of a sensible option. So I went over in '86, and basically I stayed with all of my tape trading pen friends around the country. Checked out all the different scenes like East End of London, Bristol, Manchester, Liverpool, Nottingham, and I found I actually preferred Nottingham the most out of all of the cities. I was friends with the guys in Chaos UK and Concrete Socks, and I was staying with the drummer of Concrete Socks at the time, him and his girlfriend, and they said you could stay a week, but they have people from Italy the week beforehand and people from Japan the week after or whatever, but if you want to stay longer, you can stay with our buddy, a guy called Digby. So I ended up staying with him for about 4 or 5 weeks, and I made up my mind I'm going to go back to Australia, take every shit job I could, save up money, and move to England. At that time, Dig was unemployed, and he had like a little mail order, punk rock mail order. I think he had advertised on like Flipside, Mexican Rock and Roll. He'd buy some 7 inches and some vinyl and that, and sell them on to people. I think that might have been called Earache Records at the time, but he was telling me even in '86 he was going to start a record label, and I'm like, wow, that's EMI is a record label, that's pretty ambitious. And the government at the time had a thing called the Enterprise Allowance Scheme, where if you'd been unemployed for over a year and had a business plan, they would fund your business plan for 1 year. But basically, it's the same amount of money as you get on unemployment, but they just call it Enterprise Allowance Scheme. And of course, a lot of people probably tried that and did nothing with it. But Dig used that money to set up his label. Third release was Napalm Death, and the rest is history,
What were the first 2 releases?
Spastic Blur and this number 2, I want to say maybe a Heresy release, perhaps.
Okay.
But yeah, the third one was Napalm Death. And if you think about it, too, with Napalm Death, I mean, obviously the side A and side B of Scum are 2 different lineups, but all of the members of Napalm Death as the band imploded over the years, Lee Dorian went on to form Cathedral, Justin went on to form Godflesh, Bill Steer, the other guitarist, went on to form Carcass. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, literally the label, I wouldn't, implosion, I don't know if that's the right word, but literally the label sprung from that whole band,
Yeah, definitely. And actually, real quick about Australia, did there are some Australian bands that I love.
Sure.
Did you ever get into any, like the Birthday Party or Beast of Bourbon or any of that kind of stuff?
I mean, Saints. I like the Saints back in the day. There's a bunch of super underground bands that never really sort of went anywhere, like a punk band from Adelaide called Perdition, one from Melbourne called Civil Dissident. Civil Dissident were actually on. Here's another tied to Dig and Earache. Civil Dissident were on a compilation that Pushead, the artist who did all the Metallica artwork, Misfits, etc. He had a compilation in 84, 85 called Cleanse the Bacteria. And basically, he was covering punk bands that are putting more metal influences into their music. For example, COC. Because before the whole, before the whole crossover thing, the punk scene was one thing and the metal scene was another thing. And if the fans met, they would fight or whatever. It wouldn't be like now crossover really happened like 86 or so. What is it? COC, DRI going more metal. You had guys like the Cro-Mags and that, and the Gnostic Front growing their hair longer.
Suicidal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but that whole scene before that, it was 2 different worlds.
Yeah, definitely.
And so Civil Dissident were on a compilation called Cleanse the Bacteria that Pushead did. And on the thanks list, because I was helping him put it together, and so was Digby. Both Digby and myself were on the thanks list for this record. And that was like 2 whole years before we ever met in person. So we're already kind of moving in the same circles, so to speak,
Yeah, the crossover. We actually did an episode, the crossover episode, talking about that style and that sort of melding of the 2 worlds.
Right.
And that's something that a lot of younger kids don't really appreciate, I think, is that they were diametrically opposite.
Yeah.
Because even when I was a kid, I started out, the first things I got into were, hard rock and heavy metal.
Right.
Priest.
The gateway. Yeah.
Yeah, Zeppelin, Sabbath, and then I discovered punk through the Ramones and all that, and then I was a punk.
Right.
And you can only be one or the other until like 85, 86.
Exactly.
And even then, it was like this reluctant sort of testing of the waters, if I remember correctly.
But that's why if you look at the second wave of black metal, I'm talking the Norwegian bands, but a lot of them were inspired by Venom. And Venom was like, we're metal, but they had a very, very punk, DIY attitude and sound to them, especially the early records or whatever. Like, they were raw, they were fast, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Venom, Hellhammer, Celtic Frost, all that kind of stuff.
Definitely.
Now back to Napalm Death, because it, in so many ways, like that band is sort of the genesis of like a whole sound of two different
Yeah.
styles, really, if you think about it, grindcore and death metal.
Yep, but if you look at a lot of the early sort of, whether it's posters or gig flyers, whatever, a lot of it might go like death ripping thrash or speed metal. Like no one had really locked in. Like what exactly is this sound? Do you know what I'm saying? Like there was a lot of different terms bandied about before it was settled on grindcore or whatever.
So how did you actually become part of the organization now? I mean, we got Digby Pearson.
Well, I was in Australia, and I had like pen friends all around the world and whatnot. And I moved back to England. I actually stayed with Dig. He had a different apartment when I moved back there in '89, and he kept saying, "Come work with me," because he wanted people that had a global point of view or a global understanding. As weird as it sounds. Because, obviously both of us have traveled across the world a lot, but I met people when I was living in Nottingham who had never been to London. And here's me as an Australian, like, it's 2 hours down the road, let's go. Like, nah, I'm not into that big city stuff. I'm just going to stay. They weren't even curious to go down there and check it out and decide, you know what, I hate this place, I'm never going to come back. But they'd never been. So he really wanted people, and the thing is, too, is, I guess with industry, if you're industry in America, you move to LA, New York, probably now some of the Bay Area as well. But basically in England, if you're industry, you have to be in London. So he didn't want to be in London. He felt it set him apart from the rest of the labels and that by being out of London. It's worked out very well for himself. But so he was obviously looking for people who had like a global viewpoint as opposed to just a local viewpoint,
Yeah. So, like in the early days, was just kind of operating out of his flat, or did you guys eventually get an office space?
He was doing it out of his bedroom, and when I moved over in '89, they had an office probably half the size of this, and there was like 4 of us in there. Then he took a space down the hall, and then it just went from there. They just bought a building, I think, last year. But for the longest time, he stayed in the same building. But he had like pretty much taken over half the building at that point.
When did you end up coming over to the States?
I first started coming here, I want to say either '89 or '90, and like the Lower East Side and stuff used to be sketchy as hell. Times Square still had before. It's like, was it pre-1995 when Giuliani came in? It was still sleazy, still that 70s Midnight Cowboy feel to it type of thing, which I thought was great. And I started coming there, and I probably clocked up 50 trips between Heathrow and JFK all through the 90s, just coming over and overseeing the operation or meeting managers. Or we did a couple of years with Columbia Records, so sitting in with meetings with them and whatnot. And in 2000, he said, what do you feel about moving to New York? I'm like, fuck yeah, man. And as an Australian, at that point at least, the chance to legally come and work and live in the U.S. was like, once in a lifetime opportunity that I had to jump at, I believe now, we had to pay a lot of money in legal fees to show that I was creating jobs for Americans as opposed to taking jobs from Americans and all that sort of thing. As soon as I had the chance, I got my green card and whatnot. But I believe now, I guess after the Iraqi war or whatever it is, Australia pledged a bunch of troops, and now you find a lot more Australians in New York than ever in the past. It's still quite a hard thing to get in as an Australian into the US to work.
I've always been fascinated with Australia. I've never been there myself.
Oh, you got to do it, man.
Yeah, I'm trying to get down there at some point. Just culturally, because there's so few people there compared to the United States.
Let me put it in perspective for you. The landmass is pretty much the same size as the lower 48 of the U.S., like no Alaska, no Hawaii. And you have more people living in California than the entire country.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
That's what I mean. Like per capita, there's like, it's like a wide open space, man, for the most part.
Well, when I was a kid growing up, I talked earlier on about part of the need to move and get into the action or whatever. Even a band like The Cult or Dead Kennedys, they would come and they would tour like the Gold Coast, Sydney, Melbourne, and then fuck off back to Asia or New Zealand, or they would continue to bring all of their gear to the other side of the country for however many people they projected turning up. They felt that it wasn't economically viable. Actually, even Michael Jackson in his heyday, whatever that was, not Thriller, Bad, whatever, around that era, he never came to Perth because it's like, I guess with his production, you know, like it was too much. But yes, when I was living in England, Morbid Angel, Bolt Thrower, a bunch of others ended up playing Perth, and I was like, how do people make this work? Like promoters, whatever. I was actually shocked because I didn't believe they could do it, but they figured. I guess flights got cheaper, and I'm sure some of the promoters. I don't know whether they lost their shirts on those tours, but the fact is, international like death metal bands and that were getting down there was pretty impressive to me.
Because even like the logistics of touring there between the cities.
It's flying. You can't
you
fucking
can't,
drive it. No.
Yeah, there's no van or trailer type of
You
scenario.
fly every fucking show.
Damn. Yeah, and the reality of that sort of hustle to me seems like pretty insane, man.
Well, you know Earache Records
Of course.
pretty well. He was shocked when he found out I was from Perth. He was like, why would you leave? They had an ongoing joke for the band. You know, when you tour, you start having inside jokes or whatever.
Yeah, definitely.
It was like, that's a hot chick, yeah, but not like in Perth. Like, this is a great cup of coffee, yeah, but not like in Perth. Everything, Perth was like this, you know, Shangri-La to them or whatever, which is pretty funny. I mean, it's a great place, but you're just so fucking far removed from the rest of the world.
And the other thing too is like, you know, before I became more worldly, shall we say, I was like, oh, Australia, they're like English people, you know?
Right.
But they're completely different from English people, though, really.
Well, I mean, it's like saying Canadian people are like American people or whatever. They kind of are, they kind of aren't. But I believe, I mean, it's. I would actually say now we're probably more like Americans than like English. You know, like when I was a kid, there was maybe like 2 KFCs in the entire town. We didn't get McDonald's until '86. And now, the last time I went back, it's like every second corner there's another KFC, there's another McDonald's, and all that sort of shit. Actually, in all seriousness, Australians surpassed Americans per head of population, you know, in ratio or whatever, as the fattest people in the Western world
Really?
now. Oh yeah.
Wow.
So
Okay.
all that junk food's paying off.
So that's definitely like undermining the stock of the Australians.
Right,
man.
right. Yeah, because I mean, Aussies they used to grow up because it's, you know, it's like 300 days of summer type of thing. They used to excel at sports. Even though it's a small country, they would always do pretty well in like running and swimming and shit in the Olympics and that. And I guess now though that everyone's just like, yeah, fuck, it's easy just to watch TV and eat fast food or whatever, you know.
Because I know just wherever there's some crazy shit going on, like whatever kind of rough house sort of experiences you're into, there's always an Australian there.
Right, that's true.
You know, if you go to like some local MMA fight,
Right.
there's an Australian guy on the card.
Right.
You know, you're in some like you go train to like a new jiu-jitsu school, there's an Australian guy training there on the mats, or like there's always like they're always in the mix in these like super badass like sort of things.
Well, you know, growing up there was a lot of street fights, a lot of bar fights, shit like that. And, you know, I've been all around the world, and I still, to this day, find it more, like, nerve-wracking in Australian bars and clubs than anywhere else in the world I've been. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know whether that comes from the criminal mentality, because it used to be a penal colony or whatever. But, I started going to bars as a kid since age 14, and I never got ID'd or carded. I think it was like 35 in New York when the first time I got asked for ID. But when I went back after 23 years, like, ID, sir, ID, I'm like, what the hell is this? Obviously, I mean, if you look at me, I don't look like underage.
No, definitely
But
not.
what it is they take your ID and they photograph you, almost like going through customs, because if you get in a bar fight, they go, right, that's the guy there, we got him on thing. That's why they want your ID. So it's not for any sort of concern about underage drinking. It's to do with bar violence.
Wow.
So it's pretty crazy. I mean, there's even been cases like friends back home will send me things like, you know, some supermodel smashing a beer glass over another chick's face, or, you know, it's like even the girls are into the bar violence there, man.
So back to Earache.
Yeah.
So over the years, I mean, there's been how the label's been in
31 years now, I think, and we've done over 660 releases.
Do you have any favorite releases that, you know, span in the entire?
That's a tough one. It's like saying, do you have any favorite kids or whatever?
Yeah.
But Woods 5, Gray Skies and Electric Light, that's definitely one of my favorites. I like a lot of the Cauldron releases as well. First Municipal Waste album's a good one. Obviously, the first 4 Morbid Angel as well.
Classic records,
yeah.
man, all 4 of those.
I mean, really, a lot of those, you could call them evergreen records. But Carcass artwork, I mean, it's weird for me. I'd compare it to like if you work at Disneyland behind the scenes fixing the animatronics every day. It's a different experience than when you're a kid and your mum and dad take you there, type of thing, because you're seeing behind the scenes and all the nitty gritty. But and also too, by the time most albums come out, like artwork come out, we've been listening it to every day for 3 months, so you kind of burn out on it. But I still recognize what an amazing piece of music that is, you know?
Yeah. So there's been a couple of different eras in the story of Earache Records. I mean, you're starting out extreme, the most extreme music there is. You know, there's like the early Napalm stuff, Carcass. You know, the aforementioned Morbid Angel. You guys changed things up with Godflesh, Industrial Records.
Yep.
And now you guys seem to get more into like rock and roll kind of stuff.
Yeah, so Digby basically was a drummer before doing the label. So he always wanted extreme stuff, but whenever you say you had a new like Morbid Angel demo or a Carcass demo or whatever, the first thing his ears would gravitate towards is the drums, the rhythm. And then over time, he became more like, listen to that guitar riff, and you know, he was more catching the guitars. But it took him a long time to get into singers or vocalists as an actual musical entity in itself. And it was almost like an organic progression, because we went from doing like, say, the thrash stuff to the new wave of heavy metal kind of thing. Like, we had a compilation called Heavy Metal Killers, but it was bands almost like trying to find the new Iron Maiden, you know, like singers who had range and voice, or the new Judas Priest type of thing. We had a band called White Wizard.
Oh yeah,
that did stuff like that.
Very good
so
band.
All of a sudden for him, it's like, shit, yeah, vocals, because before that, vocals were almost an afterthought. You know what I'm saying? And so then he was into vocalists. That became his fascination, and from that we discovered a band called Rival Sons. I guess he found them on YouTube. They're just like playing to 40 people in clubs in Long Beach or whatever, back rooms of bars and whatnot. And we picked them up, and 5 years later they did the final Black Sabbath World Tour, 100 shows worldwide opening for Sabbath. So we're pretty happy about that. So so vocalist became his fascination from that point. But the whole label is Dig's vision on the whole. So it's whatever he's excited about. If you think about it too, the mid to late 90s, we did extreme techno, because he was fascinated by the not so much drumming, but computerized drumming, which is drum beats. And people are like, oh, you guys did techno? It's like, no, we did extreme techno. Yeah. We did the most, it's called Gabber.
I didn't even know that.
Gabber, but it's basically working class industrial kids from Holland. They pop like 10 ecstasy pills and dance all night, but it was do like that type of 210 beats per minute, not sort of happy, loved up techno music.
A lot of there's a lot of stuff from Europe in general that fall like grime music and stuff like that. That's got like a real dark kind of vibe to it.
Right.
So I should Gabber, Gabber.
Yeah.
Okay.
But check this out. We'd ended up doing, it was actually a New York label, Industrial Fucking Strength, and we ended up doing a compilation of theirs in Europe. And, to me, I'm a guitar guy. So I was like, well, this is kind of weird, but it's a new challenge or whatever. And we ended up doing really well with the compilation. Dig and I flew to the U.S., did a full presentation for our U.S. office, which it's his office. It's not like a licensing partner or whatever. Did a full presentation, like here's how the marketing, here's the TV ads, here's like the point of purchase display systems, whatever. And the guy running the label at the time said, that's all very well and good, but this is America. This will never fly here. I'm not going to put it out. He's like, what? He goes, it's my company. You'll do as you're damn told. He's like, yeah, but kids in America don't want this, whatever. So he goes, no, just follow what we said and do it. So he does it. End of the year calls up and goes, can we have a follow-up? This is the best-selling record of the year.
Oh, wow.
So even though it was not really because now, what's it called? EDM now.
Yeah.
That's huge. It's like the biggest form of music in America now, probably. But even then, there was pockets, I guess, like Houston, Chicago, San Francisco, New York. There was definitely scenes, but it was the biggest selling record we had that year. And this was a guy who's saying it'll never catch on in America.
Damn.
You know, but so he was into that in the late '90s or whatever. So he's always, he's never been afraid to experiment and just go with what he's passionate about. And you got to admire that,
So what is some of the more recent stuff you guys are putting out?
We picked up a band this year from Colorado called Green Druid, which is like a stoner metal band type of thing. I'm pretty excited about them. One of the things that's interesting is being from Colorado and called Green Druid, there's obviously a connection to the whole marijuana business. And the way America is changing right now is, I think, the entire West Coast, it's legal, like
recreationally.
Yeah,
legal,
like you can go to get the liquor store type of thing. Colorado, it is. I know it's actually was on the front page of the Daily News today, talking about legalizing weed in New York or whatever. So that whole, it's almost like, I guess, the 1920s or the 30s when Prohibition ended, type of thing. So there's some interesting ties with promoting that band in the actually the High Times magazine, the weed magazine, they've always covered rock music as well. So that to me is pretty interesting, working with those guys. And we just started doing some trap as well, which is really cool. And for those of you who don't know, trap is like a form of hip hop, but a lot of these kids have metal influences. Like, we were talking earlier on about the punk versus Hesher metal mentality of the 80s. But there's a whole generation of kids now who grew up discovering music, say, through video games. And, if you think of the Tony Hawk's PlayStation, the skateboarding game, it would have a hip-hop track followed by a punk rock track. And kids are just like, I like this and I like this.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like a second wave crossover kind of thing.
We've been going to a lot of hip-hop shows, and the kids will be wearing like long-sleeve death metal T-shirts. There's mosh pits going on. There's a group called City Morgue who just played IVth 2 weeks back. I took this girl to the show, and before they came on, there was a DJ. Guess what he was playing? He started off with TSOL, True Sounds of Liberty. He did The Germs. He was playing, what else? Suicidal Tendencies. And she just looked at me and goes, this is not what I expected. Because these kids were all dressed in like the hip-hop, New York hip-hop gear. And they're slamming to the fucking Germs in St. Vitus.
Wow.
And no one's like, man, I'm going to sit this one out. This isn't hip-hop. I'm going to, you know what I'm saying? Like,
they're just down to get into it. Yeah. That's cool.
So that's what we're kind of, we're putting a toe in the water with that right now, we'll still be doing our death metal. We'll still be doing our fucking doom. We'll still be doing our classic rock. But, we can do whatever we want. Isn't that the purpose of being an independent record label? You do what you want sort of thing,
I didn't know about it. I think someone mentioned City Morgue to me last night, actually.
Probably might have been me.
Yeah, you know what it was? You were talking about it last night. Yeah. I have to check that out.
I'll show you the videos after we're done recording this, man.
I'd love to check it out.
You know what it is? It's like, actually, Gordon, we're talking about Gordon from Season of the Mist earlier on. It's like 10:30 on Tuesday night. He texts me, he goes, Al, send me the links to those videos. I got this new kid here who thinks he's into hip-hop. And I'm like, boom. 10 minutes later, he texts me back. He goes, you just destroyed him. You've just blown his fucking mind, Like,
nice.
Because it's like, it's like the first time you heard like grindcore, you're like what just happened? It's
wow.
so extreme that it has a similar effect, And like I said, I know a bunch of these kids, and they're into they're into a lot of metal music. In fact, one of the guys in the City Morgue, he goes, I don't go to hip hop shows, I only go to metal shows.
Wow, that's pretty far out.
It's great,
So we're sitting in this record label office, we're talking about records, but what is your take on people talk about how the physical media of tactile music, records, CDs, that's like a dinosaur sort of vibe, and now everything's streaming and online. So what are your thoughts on that, and how has Earache adjusted to this?
One of the things they said earlier on is about Dig just following his vision or whatever, but We were the second independent label in England to go online in 1996. Mute Records was first. We were second. He knew the internet was going to be something back then. If you think, too, about the 90s, it was Headbangers Ball. We used to make at least one video for every album. And then Headbangers Ball went away, and there was no, other than a couple of cable shows, there was no real national outlets for music videos anymore. I was like, why do we keep doing this? Because one day there'll be something that you can put the videos on. And sure enough, here we are with YouTube and whatever else. So we've always sort of experimented and looked forward. I mean, we did a couple of releases, in the dark days when Napster was in file sharing. We did a couple of releases like download for free. Just put your email address in and download the files. Like, we'd rather you get them from us than from some Russian file sharing site or whatever. We were one of the first independents to have a direct deal with Apple for iTunes back in the day, now Apple Music. And we're one of the first indie labels to partner up with Spotify as well. So we'll always embrace the changes. You can't be like, I met with Oliver from Century Media. Remember when there was a time when Metal Blade and Century Media put all of their music off Spotify? I met with Oliver that same day that news went live, and he's like, Al, he goes, I know it's the future, but we just have to do this for now because we got a shitty deal. We need to renegotiate, whatever. But even at that point, he was resigned to this is what a lot of people want, It's good now that the numbers, people are actually seeing a decent return on stuff with Spotify and what have you. But that said, a lot of metal guys, they're passionate about their artists. And people won't hesitate in buying like 8 different colored pressings vinyl or whatever.
Yeah.
To be completists,
Yeah, I'm definitely in that camp myself.
Yeah.
I enjoy. I have a subscription to Apple Music, and I'm always on there discovering new bands too. But if it's something I'm really into, I always buy the vinyl.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Sure. I got some releases at home where I have the CD, the cassette. I don't even think I have a cassette player anymore, but I'll buy the cassette just to have, and I'll be streaming it as well or whatever,
So is that a viable income stream these days? Is the the money or?
Well, put it this way. We have a rock band from England called Massive Wagons, and their Spotify. They've been slugging it out in the clubs for like 5 years or whatever, 4 years. Their Spotify streams this year was 1 million streams, which it's respectable. There's an unsigned trap artist I'm talking to right now. So he's no record deal. I don't think he's ever done a gig. He's got 5 million streams. So you got to have some pretty big numbers to see a decent return. You can't have 340 listeners a month and go like, shit, man, why aren't I getting like those big paychecks coming in? But there's definitely unsigned people I know who are making like $2-3 grand a month from their Spotify.
Damn.
Yeah. But that's because those kids, a lot of them just live on their phones.
Yeah, that's true. Networking and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Earlier before we started this talk, we were talking about some sensitivities and
political
sensitivities.
Yeah.
Now with this sort of emerging hip hop scene, bands like City Morgue and whatnot. Do you see any of that, like any kind of like sensitivities in that scene, as like we do in the metal scene?
I've seen a couple of. I'm not the most world's best expert on hip hop, but I've seen a couple of guys calling out other guys for perpetuating bad behavior or like say black stereotype stuff like that. I've seen a few people do that, but I feel. I wouldn't say I feel that it's not so much of an issue, but at least I haven't seen people trying to like censor people for waving around guns or.
Well, that's a real threat, though. Honestly, you know what I mean. If someone has like a weapon on them,
right.
I mean?
But I'm saying like we could probably find 10 videos on World Star today with gold chains, bling, and guns and all that type of thing. So I don't think it's as much of that type of thing, but. Talking about the black metal scene and people trying to clean it up, I don't know. It's like it's trying to stand in a river and try and stop the flow of water type of thing. The whole genre itself was based on violence and church burnings and stabbings and killings and all. it's a violent scene, or it was a violent scene. So it seems weird that people want to try and clean it up, you know.
Do you think that it's because a lot of like newer kids don't know the history, or?
I'm really not
that.
sure. I mean, I was doing this before, you know, the whole black metal scene exploded and stuff. So I was there from, you know, day one. But you know, there are some kids who are pretty well educated on the whole. You know, they can be 19 or 20, but they know the whole thing of shit that was going on in '92 or whatever in Norway and what have you. So I really don't know.
I'm excited actually to see that there's that Lords of Chaos film. That's,
I haven't seen it yet, but I've. I mean, I don't know what it is about me, but I actually do like a lot of these Hollywood interpretations of movies. Like, for example, the Germs film. I wasn't in the Hollywood scene in '77, '78, but I actually like that movie, and I do note that the band, the real band, the Germs, who obviously were there, like the kid, the actor who played Darby so much, they actually took him out on tour. So he must have got something right to do so. So I like all that, because they'll be like, oh man, it's so Hollywood, it's so lame. I'm like, I actually kind of like that sort of cornball interpretations and reimaginings or whatever that they do, you know. So I'm looking forward to seeing that for sure.
Yeah, from what I heard, it's a European-made film.
What's Jonas Ackerlund or whatever, who was the drummer of Bathory back in the day, wasn't he?
Yeah, and it has you know, the Skarsgård brothers are in it. Those two gigantic Swedish guys, and it's approaching it more like there's been a couple of cool, like, you know, pretty good, like, Charles Manson, like, docu-pics out there. So it sort of has like this vibe of not to say a fictionalized accounting, but they're giving you like a stylized version of the truth.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and there might be some embellishments for, you know, just for entertainment value.
I'm sure.
And I'm pretty intrigued by that, because I mean, you know, they're not just taking the book and adapting the entire book. Yeah. They're just taking the one drama with, you know, Varg and Euronymous and all that.
You know what's funny? I do an Instagram story every day for the Earache Records, and kids were asking me. It's actually just this week about violence between the old guard, the death metal bands, and the new guard, the black metal guys. And if you think of his label, he was calling it anti-mosh. Like, it was almost like death metal's the old wave, we're the new wave coming in. And they actually put out death threats on a bunch of metal people. They told Entombed, if you turn up in Norway, we'll kill you. And I talked to the manager before. He said, what are you going to do? He's like, well, we're contracted to play the show. We're just going to turn up and play the show. So they play the show, they get back to Sweden. So how was it? He goes, see, they're all like 15 years old, they're 5 foot high and like about this fucking skinny or whatever. So they just laughed or what have you. But a good friend of mine used to tour manage, he did the Gods of Grind tour for us and a couple of other Earache tours. He was actually tour managing Gorefest at the same time, and Euronymous had put a death threat out on the singer from Gorefest. So they turned up at the show, and here's Euronymous with a baseball bat, you know, with nails sticking out of it. And he just, you know, he said he walked up to Euronymous and said, you know, the kid's like 5 foot tall. He goes, put that bat away or shove it up your ass. And he just ran off, and that was the end of it. So, you know, there was violence even from Euronymous back then, you know.
Are you a fan of horror films? I think you are,
Of course, yeah, huge.
Did you see the new Halloween film?
Yes.
All right, what are your thoughts on that?
You know what? I saw the other day you wanted to ask me about that, and I was kind of like, how do I fucking answer it? Honestly, I've seen all of the Halloween films over the years. I mean, even what was the one with LL Cool J? H2O, perhaps?
H2O, yeah, maybe.
I even saw that one, man. Sure. But it's like, I mean, it's kind of, in a sense, what do they do? They've ignored a lot of the films that came after and all this sort of thing. I mean, it is what it is. I didn't hate it, but I didn't like, oh my God, I got to own this on DVD, Blu-ray, you know, everything either. Do you know what I'm saying?
I'll probably get it on Blu-ray. At first, I changed as time went by, my opinion about it changed a little bit. When I first saw it, and immediately afterwards, I was just not into it.
Right.
I was like, man, I felt like they had a really cool opportunity to kind of play around with the story and the character and do something cool with it, but they just kind of didn't really. You know?
But I think the key issue on that one was you've got someone who life was destroyed or changed dramatically from a shocking incidence of violence. Meaning what's the Laurie?
Oh, Laurie, yeah.
And PTSD, and it's about her facing her fears, and dealing with the boogeyman that's terrified her whole life. That was the main issue of the film. I mean, obviously you've seen the Rob Zombie ones as well.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of those either.
But it's like, it's almost in a sense, by giving the whole backstory to Michael, you take away a little of the scariness of him or whatever.
Also, Rob Zombie. The thing is about Rob Zombie, I like the way he directs.
Yeah.
I don't like his writing though.
Right.
So his writing is very it's like the same old rehashed Whiskey Tango sort of vibe, like trailer park stuff. And I'm just like, dude, that's like 20 years out of date, really. Back in the 90s, I remember that was this thing, like trucker hats and all that. And I like the way his films look, but
What is the one with his wife or girlfriend, whatever she is? She's a radio DJ.
Lords of Salem?
Yeah, I actually find, because it's not exactly like the world's best horror film, but if you said pick one Rob Zombie film, I would actually probably head more towards that now than any others,
Yeah, Lords of Salem, I agree with you on that, because I didn't really, I went in there with low expectations, and, I checked it out, I watched it. It was me and 3 other people in the theater, and it was very, it was his homage to, Dario Argento and, Giallo European films. And it was the one that I enjoyed the most out of anything I've seen by him.
Right, me too.
I saw 31, and once again, I think his directing is great. And then there was this weird Q&A after that, and he straight up was I wrote the script in an afternoon. And I was like, dude, can't you just, give us a little bit of, a little mystery here?
Exactly. Damn, man, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but the new Halloween, I changed my opinion about it a little bit more. I'm like, yeah, it was entertaining, it was cool. It's maybe I built it up too much to be something different, but I guess at the end of the day, I liked it, and I'll probably get the Blu-ray.
Right. Let me ask you a question then. What about any new zombie films that you rate at all?
New like zombies?
Yeah.
Oh, geez, man. There's actually quite a few. There's a French movie called The Night Eats the World.
Yep, seen that one.
I really like that one. It's definitely more, it's not like a gore-soaked, it's there's more impressionistic. There's not a lot of dialogue in it. That one I think is really cool.
He has the drum kit set up in the apartment and all
that.
Yeah,
yeah, and he's playing drums and he's listening to the tapes and everything.
There's another French one, I forget the name, I want to say The Horde, perhaps. Where there's drug cops are going into a tenement building to raid it, and the guys that they were about to bust, they have to team up to fight the zombies. That's another really good French zombie one.
Yeah, I dig that one, man. That was great. There's also a French-Canadian film called Ravenous, which is another sort of...
I want to say I have that at home, but I'm drawing a blank.
It's a good one, man.
Have you seen Patient Zero?
That's on the very edge of my... Yes, I want to see that.
Okay,
do you recommend it?
Yes, because it's a different, it's a whole different spin. Because it was so sad. I mean, because if you think about, at least when I was a kid, seeing Dawn of the Dead, 1978, was mind blowing. Holy fucking shit!
Totally.
That was the extreme end of horror.
Yeah, definitely.
And we have basically a weekly, whether it's with The Walking Dead or the Fear the Walking Dead, it's basically a weekly zombie show every week. So anyone who comes out with a movie now with their slow lumbering zombies and all that, is you've got to have a fresh spin on it to make it interesting. But Patient Zero is a good one. It's actually, I think it's a British film, but they're making out that they're Americans.
Okay.
A lot of fake American accents and all this. That's a good one. Have you seen another British one called The Girl with All the Gifts?
Yeah, that's a great one. Yeah.
But again, it's, you know what I'm saying? It's I honestly think not too much actually happens in that film. To me,
good.
To me, the best scene is when they go topside and the whole military base is getting overrun by the zombified civilians.
Yeah, it has a little slight nod to Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
Because it's the military underground thing. Then they're on topside. And the ending of that film, I thought, was pretty rad.
Yeah, we won't spoil it for those who haven't seen it, but again, it's a fresh spin on the whole zombie thing. I'm still waiting for them to make a 28 months later.
Me too, because I really enjoyed those two films too.
Yeah, Romero, he kind of he got pissy about 28 weeks later at first. and someone pointed out they're not zombies, they're infected. He's like, all right, and then he said, you know what, it's actually pretty good.
Yeah, totally. Because it's because even in the first 28 days later, you see that they actually gas out like after a while because they're alive.
Yeah.
They're actually people that are infected by this weird virus.
The scene in the tunnel when they're trying to move the taxi cab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at the very end of this, you see someone starving to death, someone dehydrated or whatever, and it's like, it's a very cool like new vibe on the quote unquote zombie. You know what I mean?
Right. The second one, I think pound for pound, it has one of the best opening scenes on a zombie film ever. But I think there was either budget problems. There was a couple of scenes where it looks like it was shot with almost like not a camcorder, like a second crew is filming, like when they lock all the British guys in the building and they all get infected.
Yeah.
That kind of the quality of that compared to the start, but the opening scene is just insane.
That was like definitely, I was on the edge of my seat. I saw that in the movie theater.
Yep,
and I was
me
just
too.
like, man, this is like so tense, and I was nervous watching that film, that part of that film.
The first time I think I walked out of the theater, I'm like, man, like what a bitch, like leaving his wife behind and all that. But if you go back and rewatch it a couple of times, he kills about 10 with an iron bar or whatever. You've only got so much physical strength left. She runs one way after some kid that she only just met. He goes to try and save her, and he's stuck between, fear and adrenaline gives in, and he takes off that way, and they're stuck the other side of the bedroom or whatever it was,
And it's some things too, man, is you don't realize how quickly you get tired, like when you're fighting or when you're doing something like as extreme as that. Like how just fatigue sets in, man.
Yeah.
And after a while, you're just shot.
But it ends with him just in the boat going, oh shit, because there's adrenaline dump. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very realistic.
Yeah.
It was very well thought out. I thought that scene.
But the third one was meant to be basically somewhere in Russia, because the kid brings it to mainland Europe.
Yeah.
And it's basically the last survivors. Siberia or whatever hold up as the whole country has fallen type of thing. So that'd be cool to see. I don't know if that's still the plan, but that's what they were talking about last time.
I'm totally into that idea, for sure. Another question I always bring up to people is, who do you prefer in the world of Iron Maiden, Paul Di'Anno or Bruce Dickinson?
It's got to be Bruce.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Paul's more the street punk sort of thing.
I would have pegged you as a Di'Anno guy.
Right. Not.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
But that's, I'm the opposite way around with AC/DC. If you think about it, Brian Johnson was in the band, twice as long as Bon Scott, but I'm Bon Scott all the way,
Yeah, I'm definitely Bon Scott all the way, man. That guy to me is like pure, like the epitome of like rock and roll.
Right.
Man.
He's actually buried in my hometown, and they actually have a statue of him in the town square. And it's actually, unfortunately, though, it's life size, so it's about yay high or whatever,
Oh wow,
yeah,
okay.
Which is pretty funny. But
yeah, I think Bon Scott. I mean, it's funny that I found out about AC/DC when Back in Black hit, in the early '80s when I was a kid, and I thought that was like their first album.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right,
I'm like,
right.
wow, this is like great, cool stuff. But then there's a whole career with this other guy that didn't even get that treatment in the 70s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they didn't tour the States with him, really. I don't think they did, at least.
yeah, they did.
They did.
They actually did their first tour, I believe it was opening for Kiss.
Okay.
They did it in a station wagon because they're all so small, they could all fit in with their gear in a station wagon, and they would actually pull up to these enormodomes. I think this is the heyday of Kiss, like 77, 78, they're at their peak. Security would be like, who the fuck are you? We're the support band. Like, no, you're not. Like, no, we are. But the security would not believe them pulling up to every venue because they had this a station wagon with all their gear, like probably Malcolm curled up in the bass drum or whatever, because they're all tiny guys,
Huh. Yeah, that's it's unfortunate that they didn't rise to the heights they did in the 80s, though. You know what I mean? That's when with Brian Johnson is when they really put the flagpole up.
Yep.
But oh wow, it's cool. I'm surprised by the Dickinson. Actually.
But think of a lot of people are talking about, Judas Priest only got a couple of years left in them. Iron Maiden's only got a couple of years left in them. Sabbath have done their final tour and all that sort of thing. Who's going to replace them? And you look at bands like Ghost and Amon Amarth and bands that are drawing like 3,000-4,000 right now. Who's going to be the next stadium metal bands? But those bands, I mean, shit. I mean, the Modern Marth would have been going like 25 years now or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, they've already, people look at Nurgle, Behemoth or whatever, like, man, like he's doing really well. But yeah, he's been doing it 28 years,
True. And that's the thing. I don't think we're going to see any more like stadium rock bands, really. I think those days are over.
But Ghost is drawing. I mean, they are drawing big crowds. I think they just did Brooklyn the other day.
Oh, was it the Brooklyn Metal or what's it called? Brooklyn Steel.
Yeah, no, not Brooklyn Steel.
The Williamsburg.
No, the big one.
The Barclays Center.
Yes, Barclays. That's it. Yeah.
I saw them with Iron Maiden, and they filled the Barclays Center.
Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. That's
but you see what I'm saying? They're starting to. I mean, they probably closed off the upper tiers or whatever.
Right.
But they're starting to play bigger and bigger venues.
Yeah, they're probably one of the only bands though. I think that they draw a lot of. I mean, their sound too. It's like a very.
It's watered down,
catchy sort of. You can relate to it if you're not into extreme music.
But I mean, you talk about Iron Maiden. I mean, in a sense, you could say they write pop songs. I mean, there's verse, chorus, and stuff like that. They're very sing-alongable. Sing-alongable, is that even a word? But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like a...
No, definitely not. Yeah. Well, Priest. Yeah, and these are the bands that are, making these, like, drawing these huge crowds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ghost falls right into that. Yeah, I guess you could say the same thing about Mastodon's later material, too. They're going more for this kind of arena like vibe.
Gojira as well, perhaps.
Yep. Yeah. Well, actually, I actually like that band quite a lot, man. Another band with the 8-string guitars, I think.
Yep.
Well, Al, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you having me to the office.
Hell yeah.
And thanks for listening, everyone, and see you next week.
Take it easy, guys.
You've been listening to Metal Matters, a Gimme Radio podcast. We'll be back next week, so be sure to subscribe and never miss out. Also, be sure to check out Gimme Radio via web, iOS, or Android for one of the best metal communities in the world, exclusive interviews and merch, and so much more.